Hello, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night. We got all of these time zones on board right now. I am very excited, as you can probably tell, about this panel. The mic sustainability from around the globe. And I have three fabulous panelists joining me right now. I'm gonna give you the very short version of the bio after you just get to say hi. Hi, ladies. I am so excited that you're all here.
Hi, Bridget.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Good, good. So let's see. Uh, Chao is joining us today from Kenya. She holds a PhD in computer science from the University of Cape Town and a master's degree from the University of Oxford. And she was the first Kenyan to win the 2020 OWSD Elsevier Foundation Award in Engineering, Innovation, and Technology, and has a long list of awards, to be honest. I'm not going to read through all of them right now, but you can see them on the page that was advertising the panel. She is an active advocate for quality education, research, and structured mentorship. She is the founder and program lead for Kamilimu, an impactful structured mentorship program that complements classroom learning for university students studying tech-aligned courses. Her mentorship initiative was awarded a 2020 Silver Award in the Nurturing Employability category by the prestigious Reimagine Education Awards and Conference as a successful educational innovation, which is enhancing student learning outcomes and employability. She's currently Dean of the School of Science and Technology at Kenya Methodist University. Welcome. Then we have Champika Elababa, who is a senior lecturer at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Ruhuna in Sri Lanka. Champika works on environmental management, ecosystem conservation, and pollution control. Her research focuses on controlling invasive macrophytes in wetlands and river ecosystems and encouraging the natural resistance of native plants to invasive species. Further, she's interested in human behavior in relation to resource use and solid waste generation, including e-waste. Welcome. And then we have Yuri Castro. Yuri is a Master's of Engineering from Kyunghee University in South Korea and studied Science and Systems Engineering at the University of San Carlos de Guatemala, and currently works in the National Secretariat of Science and Technology as ICT Project Manager. She's also professor at the Postgraduate Studies School of the Faculty of Engineering at the Universidad de San Carlos de Guatemala. Yuri carries out data generation and analysis projects and collaborates with the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World, OWSD, as strategic support in a technical area and the data analysis. And then, you know this one. Sorry, that was assuming. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Birgit Penzenstadler, and I'm currently faculty at Chalmers University in Gothenburg, Sweden. And my research is mainly in sustainability and what software engineering can contribute to that. And this is the reason why the three of you are here, because we want to talk about sustainability around the globe. And as we are completely virtual this year, we wanted to make sure that we get a chance to hear voices from countries that are usually not so much represented at this conference, and also from a little bit outside of pure software engineering. So we get some new inspirations, we get some new ideas. So we've had some preliminary conversations about, well, what are we aiming for here? Wait, if I'm not a software engineer, what am I actually going to talk about to you? And it was about, well, we want the perspectives from the different countries, and we also want the perspectives from your more specific lenses or topic areas that are slightly out of the main focus of this conference, because what we all need is a little bit of fresh air, some new inspiration. It's very easy to stew in our topic areas and in our well, let's say areas of expertise. And then when we get a chance to look over the rim of our teacups every once in a while and look at a different perspective, that's usually super beneficial. So let's see, I got a couple of questions. So first of all, thank you very much. we are covering very different time zones from Sri Lanka to Kenya to Guatemala. Yuri got up for us in the middle of the night. Like, it's super late. And so thank you for coming. I have prepared 2 rounds of questions that we're going to go through and just play a bit, and then we want to open it up to the audience. So, audience, you are involved in the co-creation of this session, and we will definitely have a good chunk of it as Q&A. So whatever your questions are, pop them in the chat or write them down and put them out a little later as you wish, and we will certainly get to those. So with that, round one, I would like to hear a specific story from you, like what you contributed and what you feel makes a difference in the world, because all of you have made very significant contributions. And we'll start with Chao. You recently gave a TEDx talk titled Holding Up the Ladder, and you're known for improving education and caring very much about it. So could you give us your perspective on how we can successfully support our students beyond the classroom?
Okay, thank you so much, Richard, for that, and everyone for joining. So I'll give my perspective in how we can contribute from specifically the mentorship aspect, and by this I mean out of the classroom support, because the objective is not to replace the classroom, but simply to complement it. And so the first approach that I've tried out and currently using that we can all probably try in our own environments is before we go out to support students outside the classroom, as researchers, especially in this conference, is to understand the needs of what the students may want outside the classroom. Because we found that making the assumption that students definitely need help in X, Y, Z is usually not sustainable. So the approach that that my team and I took in the mentorship program that we are currently working on is to first understand when students say that they want mentorship, what is that? What do they look for? And that is very important, both as a mentor and educator, and really, again, specifically as researchers, because we need to first understand the needs of the people we aim to serve. And from that, we found that students need help in 5 areas. The first is personal development. So a lot of students were saying, we learned this really great ICT or tech skills in the classroom or software engineering skills in the classroom, but we really like to work on our personal confidence, for example. And personal confidence can be everything from the ability to stand in front of an audience and talk about your science to being able to have the confidence to apply for opportunities, because we find that a lot of people don't apply for opportunities not because they don't have the skills, but because they feel either intimidated or they're afraid of the competition. So personal development is really key, and a lot of students asked for that in addition to what we learn in the classroom, we'd like to get that. There's also professional development, and this includes, I have this really great ICT skills. How do I package that for a technical interview? How do I prepare my Git portfolio, for example, to really be presentable? How do I create a portfolio in the very first place to be able to present to a potential employer? And how do I even prepare for that interview? So professional development falls in that aspect of really looking outward for opportunities and how to prepare for them. And then the third is innovation. And for innovation, we found that students were asking for, I have these technical skills that I've learned in the classroom, whether in software engineering or programming or any other skill. How do I use those skills to solve a socioeconomic issue in the society? So the question there becomes is, how do we even teach students how to identify a good problem? Because a good problem is the first step towards a good solution. And then how do they apply the skills that they have to solve that good problem? So innovation is the third thing we found. Then fourth is scholarship. So scholarship is an interesting one because we found that a lot of students may have either seen scholarship opportunities, or some actually don't even know where to find scholarship opportunities. And scholarships include, the scholarship to attend a conference to a scholarship to do a project in the local community. So that entire range.
Mhm.
And the skills to that the students are looking for is how to write winning applications, because that in itself
Mhm.
is a very key skills that a lot of us are still learning. But for students, they might really need that training to do the first application, or to just deal with rejection when it comes to such applications. Then finally, we found that students are seeking support to engage in the community. And community here is broad, because we're looking at community in terms of the local tech community and even the international community,
Mhm.
as well as how to give back to the community. So that can
Mm.
be, for example, there are spaces that they can be given to where they can teach digital skills to people who may want that. So giving community engagement involves both giving back and also finding connections. So those are 5 ways that I would readily recommend, because they are both based on research that we've done, as well as it's the fundamental pillars of the mentorship work that I lead here in Kenya.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is super interesting, and I bet there'll be a ton of questions around that in the Q&A. Um, I I am very inspired by this leadership approach, because it seems like if we are lucky in our lives, and we have personal mentors and maybe older friends and a network that can help us with that, then we may find those outside of the university. But for those who are not as fortunate, they need that
Yeah.
support in those 5 areas. So
Yeah.
thank you. I think it's a great framework. Um, cool. Um, Champika, you work in aquatic ecology and resource consumption and pro-environmental behavior. Could you give us a brief insights on what that entails and where you see the challenges and what unique perspective Sri Lanka brings in that regard?
Yes, actually, I work into different areas in my research, but there's a connection also, because
Mhm.
aquatic ecology and resource use. Because if there is no ecosystems, we don't have any way to find resources. So
Mhm.
I think that resource use and ecosystems has very very close relationships, because that as the entire world, one of the problems we are facing is that the global warming and related consequences, and air pollution, water pollution, so many problems are there, and in some cases some problems are uh, is strong here in our countries because of unawareness, maybe
Mhm.
unavailability of management method, maybe the problems in the rules and regulations. So many things are there. But if I go into specific details related to that, actually, in aquatic ecology, my basic focus is to protect the systems, because with the human, I mean, irrespective of whether it is a developed country or developing country, we as humans, we have utilized a lot of resources. That's an unarguable factor, because I have done my research in several developed countries in the world, and in my country also. Everywhere I have seen that we have exploited them in some manner, is in unbearable manner in sometimes, because of our human needs. And
Mhm.
when it comes to my country specifically, that for excessive fertilizer usage, excessive
Mm.
agrochemical usage is there, and that is causing damages to the ecosystems in one sense. On the other sense, countries like us generally have higher population compared to the developed countries, with that the resource limitations are more strong in our country. So that actually this combination here, because natural resources must be there if we want to use that and in one sense we have to enhance the living standards of the people. We cannot say this that just that protect the environment and you cannot use. On the other sense, that we have to have them to use.
Mm-hmm.
In this conflict, I understand that pro-environmental behavior and conservation of resources is very important. And in that, I see in our countries, awareness, attitude, and the problems in rules and regulations. Those things should be studied in detail because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise we may be late to repair or restore.
Mm-hmm.
So in
Yeah.
that case, actually that waste the thing aspects related to waste generation and waste disposal came into my research at that stages. So I am currently focusing on few aspects related to and I think that by understanding the human knowledge, their awareness, their attitude, we can find ways to improve.
Mm-hmm.
That is my goal of doing this all the research in a combination and
Mm-hmm.
finally achieve something for my country as well as to the globe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing that. There was a lot in there to unpack. I just want to quickly touch on two, well, on one point with an example. You mentioned the over fertilization in agriculture, and that is something that is currently still going on in Sri Lanka. I have a sneaking suspicion that this may be around the globe in very, very many countries. And the reason why I picked that one up is when you speak of developing versus developed countries, I get very suspicious about that term. And maybe you've had conversations around this previously. I mean, first of all, that kind of sounds like some countries have done it better than others, which I'm not so sure about. They may have done better in like a specific regard, and they may have a higher economic status in the world in some places, but they may also have done other things significantly wrong, like in terms of overconsumption and not maintaining sustainability. And then maybe there is also a giant discrepancy in terms of social equity. And so um, I'm not sure if I've ever want to live in a developed country because it kind of sounds like we're done developing, which, ooh, no, I think we got a lot of improvement to do everywhere. So I'm not sure what a better term would be, and I know those are the currently used ones out there. But maybe that is a point of discussion as well for the Q&A later on. So thank you very much for sharing that perspective. Good. So Yuri, you work in data generation and analysis, and you collaborate with the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World. There's that word again. Could you tell us a bit about one project that you did that relates to what Guatemala brings to the global community?
Well, thank you very much. In my case, it's a little bit different because I don't do research as
Mhm.
it. So I will share my story, right? When I came back from South Korea, I was excited to reply my research, my science. But the first gap I found was there was no data at all. No data
Mm,
about system transportation or vehicle inspection or anything. When I looking for some others data set to try to make some kind of experiment, also education or health, no data. So it
mhm,
was a really complicated to get the data from the official sources. I found some reports or they gave me some kind of physical document, right? But not this kind of structured data. So you have to type it, and this is a really difficult job. If
mhm,
It was really sad. So that was around 2016. But fortunately, a few months later, I started to work in the National Secretariat of Science and Technology. And there was one project. They started to work with open data movement. So I say to my boss, I wanted to work on it. I will work on it. So I start to work on it. And we built the project from the scratch. We don't have nothing, so we started from the scratch. We learned from other countries, as example, Colombia, Argentina. We look UK, but is high level, so we moved back to Mexico and these kind of countries. And we launched the government open data website on June 2018, 2 years after. And we teach to other government institutions how to open the data, how to publish this data from open, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Everybody can take the data and make some kind of research, some kind of innovation, some kind of startups based on this data. And I think this is the most important contribution I can make,
Mhm.
because if you do research in every topic, you need data. At least in data science and or machine learning, that the area I used to work. Um, if you are in the place or if you are in the country, it's kind of easy to get the data because you can make some uh, forms or some take the data from the people, right?
Mhm.
And generate this kind of data. But if you are doing research for other places,
Mhm.
is research that involve a lot of countries, open data is useful. So it's coming from official sources. And with the OWSD, I used to say it in Spanish, sorry.
Mhm.
uh, we have only 1 year, so we
Mhm.
are started, and we start to develop a database with the information of each other, each
Mhm.
member, and to know each in which fields are working, who is who. um, and we discovered we are not just one or two people working on science in Guatemala. We are around in this moment more than 200 women working in different fields and live in not just in Guatemala, living around the world and doing science. And it's really excited because we are not alone. So as a
Yes.
women, we are not alone doing science in a country where science is not a priority.
Mhm.
So I
Yes.
stop here.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really great. Yeah. So, a contribution to making open data available to the world about Guatemala. I think that is like very much a contribution to both worlds, like to science. So, everybody in the audience, if you ever wanted to do a research study with Guatemala, now you know who to approach. Um, and at the same time, give more visibility to Guatemala in the global community. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, we got a second round of questions, and this is where I would love for the audience to chime in as well, because they are more shorter prompts in terms of what's next. So from here on, we'll just go with the flow of the conversation, and whoever of you feels like you would like to speak to this question, you can go ahead. So the first one is, what would you say are blind spots of the international research community when we are trying to include researchers from underrepresented countries better?
Who is first?
Yeah, don't.
Go first. So that's a very difficult and but interesting question, and I say that from the perspective of I serve as a peer reviewer at an international conference, and I find that I was looking through the list, and I've done this for this is my third year now. Every year I look through the list of reviewers, and I find that I am one of two reviewers who are researchers from Africa. Everyone else is not. And so I think I think this also goes to thinking about one of the ways that we can have a more inclusive environment. So my first thinking is always, it's really unfortunate that we don't have a lot of researchers from Africa, for example, being part of those such review sessions, and it's not because the international communities have not reached out to us. Sometimes we find that the responsibility is also, say, on myself as the researcher who is serving as in an international platform to really be to really spread the word that, hey, there's this opportunity, could you come on board? So it's a very two-way issue that I see, that it's not just, we don't have the invitation. It's sometimes it's because those of us who have gotten into such platforms just need to basically bring more of our colleagues on board. But the other issue, blind spot, I'll say that I think is worth probably discussing at a much broader context than here, is just a better understanding of the contextual issues that researchers in different areas of the world go through would be really great. So, for example, if a researcher who is writing a paper on the fact that the learners in the classroom don't have, say, laptops or mobile
Mhm.
phones, without understanding that can actually potentially be a real context, it's
Mhm.
very easy as a reviewer to probably look at it as something that's not really crucial, or it's probably a trivial approach or a trivial example. But so I think for me is, as we look at more inclusive research, there's two issues. There's the just having more inclusive, such as this particular panel, but in terms of actual
Mhm.
review of work, to have more inclusive people on board, but also to really just increase the understanding of different contexts, especially when reviewing and giving feedback to two researchers who may be in the same track for a conference,
Mhm.
but they're coming from very different contexts, and both contexts can actually be valid because that's the reality on the ground. So that would be my contribution to that.
Yes, thank you. I think both of those are really good points. Um, Yeah, so for the visibility and PC inclusion, like I've been on several discussions where we talked about how can we include, say, more reviewers from African countries, for example, and we always run into the trouble, well, do you, do you know anybody who's good? Do you know anybody who's good? And then we start searching and we like it's really in part trouble of having the network because um, we trust more in each other when there is a personal connection. Like we don't only want to confide in some publications we find, but also in like, oh, I've actually spoken to this person, and yes, of course, like the visibility on certain platform matters to even be able to be visible in a global research community. And I would love to talk more about how that can be improved from both sides because I'm the diversity inclusion co-chair for ICSE next year. Yeah, good. Um,
So
Yuri or Champika, would you like to comment on this
yes,
question as well?
I will actually. Maybe these my aspects are not maybe they are not directly related to software engineering because that environment our research there are many requirements in data measurements, and so that kind of in that kind of things one of the main aspects is we need a lot of equipment and chemicals and so many things. With these actually it has become a big problem to that in those areas, those cost is very high, and with those things, there are very few researchers in those areas in our countries. There is one aspect actually in related to the international research. We are underrepresented. We become underrepresented countries automatically in that sense because that most of the equipments available in the other countries are not return to the country. That is one aspect. There is one reason that there are many very few researchers in the countries like ours.
Yeah.
Those things may contribute to become the countries like ours to be underrepresented.
Mhm.
Finally,
Yeah, I have to be agreed with this two opinion because in our case is so similar. We don't have enough researchers. And for
Mm-hmm.
example, I know the terminology is not the best, but in developing countries, we have big issues.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
let's say hunger or corruption or even
Mm-hmm.
war. So people work to solve the first needs, and for example, food in the table. And even education is not for your needs when you are a farmer and you have to work with your child in the fields.
Yes.
Talking about technology and discoveries, theoretical algorithm, or let's say improving some algorithm, it's not
Mm-hmm.
need first need in at least in my country. People doesn't care about research if they need food,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the few investment in research are focused on SDG. So
Mm-hmm.
technology is second or third place. For
Mm-hmm.
example, in my country, we only have 3G in telecommunications. So we
Mm-hmm.
cannot talk about big data, IoT, vehicle-to-vehicle communications, and these big
Right.
projects. Um, First, our infrastructure is kind of obsolete and
Yeah.
insufficient.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot connect even our country. Our digital divide is huge. And the last statistic, as I remember, is only the 30% of the people have uh, access to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So we cannot talk about technology if
Mm-hmm.
we have this kind of situation. So maybe our research fields are not the most relevant or novelties for participate in international conference. As
Mm-hmm.
we talked before, they are a little bit afraid to participate
Mm-hmm.
in the grandes ligas.
Yeah. Yes. Uh-huh.
So maybe to include these underrepresented countries, you can find maybe they don't are qualified or they don't have the level, not
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have the skill, it's
Yeah.
because they don't have the opportunity. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe one try is to include this topic that are relevant for these underrepresented countries. Maybe noise is not the novelty in technology, but will
Mm-hmm.
be novelty in these countries. And we
Yes.
can start to practice to participate in international conference. I know,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
I love that perspective. Yeah, it's super relevant because it's not about technology for technology's sake. It's how can we use technology in the context of this country such that it's beneficial to the country. So it's not about what's the next fancy algorithm for big data if, as you said, the basic network connectivity and even having access to IT is one of the challenges there. I think this ties in nicely with a question from Claudia in the chat. She says, I think that the perception of sustainability related to software engineering used to be different in developed and non-developed countries in many centers, and also with different motivations. So can we foster sustainability, software engineering for sustainability, taking into account such differences? And so I think that ties in nicely with what you said, Yuri, about the SDGs, and that usually like we find that IT systems are being used in support of any of the SDGs. And so the question is more, how do we move towards the SDGs? And so maybe a way of including diverse researchers from around the world in these conferences would then to be to say, let's focus on SDG on the educational one, like good quality education for everyone, and then the IT support for that, and then what does that look like within software engineering?
Yeah.
Um, yes, yeah, good question.
Maybe, Bridget, I can just add to that.
Yeah.
One approach that I've seen also work in terms of just bringing more diverse researchers on board is when you have, say, if you're forming a committee, like the conference committee for this particular conference, it might be a good idea to consider maybe having an international committee, whether as a subcommittee or uh, a sub part of the main committee, and ideally these people then act as ambassadors. So, for example, it's easier for me to speak to my colleagues here at the university and tell them, there's this conference, I'd like you to present a research. It's easier for them to get on board than assume, if they see it on a website or an advertisement. So Found International Committee have worked in ICSE. ICSE is another conference for computer science. It's worked fairly well. So that could be a model that can also be explored.
Yes. Yeah. I very much like the concept of ambassadors. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think that ties in nicely with Claudia's second comment about having people from different contexts tied into the PCs would enrich the global vision of our diverse realities. Yes, so yes to both of those, like the ambassadors to even put word out about the conferences, and then also to grow the network, and then bring that back to the research community by having more diverse angles on this. Good. And so, dear audience, if you want to get your questions in, now is about the time, because we're down to 10 minutes for this session. And as long as no further questions do come in, I'm going to carry on with my list of questions. So I still got a few in store that we can talk about, and I'd be happy to take more from the audience. Another question that I have is, and Chao, you already touched upon that in your opening statement. So maybe we can hear a little bit from Champika and Yuri on this one. How can we create a more inclusive environment in teaching? But also in research. So it's open to the three of you. Like, I'm interested in all three of your perspectives, specifically for the context of the country that you come from. So again, give us a little bit more insight into what are the needs at your place. We know that we have already heard a couple of points, like only 30% of people in Guatemala have access to the internet, and then there are many classrooms in African countries where students do not have laptops or phones. And what else comes to mind that needs to be taken into account here?
Actually, what I think is, yes, one problem is that the inability to access the internet. Those things are common for many of the countries, but in one sense, what I understand is that I mean, people's need for education and their goal for they are we should improve their goal actually. That is because if someone don't know there are those opportunities, that those people don't have a need to achieve them. That is also as far as I understand, one of the major aspects that need to be improved in our countries is to make them aware that these opportunities that are there if you go for the education. And actually those things are also problems in our countries because of the income of the families and other things. People try to earn at early stages and leave it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because education needs cost and need money and effort and time. But when your family needs your support, then they might think it is easy to earn something and support them rather than spending another few years for education and doing something better. Maybe that is also a big problem I see in the countries, because I have seen that the upbringing of children and the background of the family has has decided whether they become successful or not.
Yes.
Students with same skills sometimes.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. And then we have a contribution in the chat. Zelalem, I'm not sure, I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of your name, but Zelalem said, I agree to the said ideas. And in addition, I think conferences and journal organizers need to consider supporting with some incentives to increase developing countries' participation, for example, reducing registration fees and the likes. So yeah, and we talked about having virtual conferences like this one when we were still in the backstage area. So that will also open up access more than if people are requested or required to travel. So I have a last one that I would really like to get out there, and that's if you could make each three of the three of you, if you could make one big wish for the future of research and education, what would that be?
Actually, in my sense, what I think is education and research all must be beneficial for the life in this planet. But what I
Mm-hmm.
see is in many cases, education and research finally leads to the end of life in this planet. So if I can have a big wish and achieve it, my goal is to achieve education and research uh, for the life, to
Yes.
have anyone and everyone have a better life,
Mm-hmm.
including us humans as well as animals and plants, everything.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. So really keeping global sustainability in mind, including all forms of life on this planet. Yes. That was a tough one to follow up on.
Well, in my case, it's a little bit hard to choose one, just only one, right? But I
You
think,
can have several.
yeah, like on my birthday, right? I think the my wish is credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what does it mean that? If I believe in science, I will invest in science. It will be created more opportunities to generate research. And if you invest in education instead of army, so you have
Mm-hmm.
more opportunities. So my big wish is that people in power and the citizens, especially from my country, believes in science, because
Mm-hmm.
nowadays our researchers, at least in Guatemala, they don't have credibility. We have
Oh.
really big issues, other big problems, corruptions, and even this kind of local wars, right? So we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of investment in army, but not in research. So my
Mm-hmm.
wish is that more credibility for science, because this imply education, this imply developing, this implying a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
So my
Ciao.
my wish is in two parts. The first is I want to see a world where education is wholesome and is also about the person and the mind and the humanity in addition to the technical skills. And
Mm-hmm.
secondly, I'd like to see, in terms of research, I'd like to see, and research and tech really, more investment in non tech startups because there's a craze
Mm-hmm.
of VC funding into everything that is shiny and techy. So I
Sure.
really want to see more investment in non tech startups that are looking at the, it's not another app, it's not another
Mm-hmm.
tech product, but just more interest in non-tech startups and organization.
Mm-hmm. Note everybody, this is coming from an IT educator. I think this is really valid. Sorry, carry on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, those are my two wishes.
Mm, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. I really like that. That's a very good point because like it comes back to the sometimes we forget that sometimes tech is the shiny new thing instead
Yeah.
of what do we want it to contribute. Hmm. Good.
Mm.
Well, that already brings us to the very last minute of this panel. So I want to take the opportunity and thank you, Chao, thank you, Champika, thank you, Yuri,
Thank you.
for joining us here, for adding your perspectives, for sharing your experiences, and for sharing your visions, and also hopefully opening up our perspectives a little wider and giving us some new ideas. And we will make sure that people can find you in on your respective pages and reach out to you and connect via LinkedIn or via other means. I would love to keep this
Thank you.
conversation going.
All right. Thanks for having us, Bridget.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very
You're most
much for
welcome.
inviting us.
Yeah. And so,
Thank you.
dear audience, if you want to join us in the discussion room, that will pop up just a few seconds after we go offline in here, and we will join you there in about half a minute. We'd love to hear some more of your questions and go into the informal part of the chat that, yeah, we're all looking forward to as well. So thanks a lot, everyone.